Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath,
the podcast where we discuss relationships in movies and our relationships with them.
I'm Polina Grunbaum.
And I'm Diana Rojek Skonnord.
Hello, Diana.
Polina, even though this is your last episode on HEAMCast, near, far, wherever you are, I believe that the show will go on.
I am glad. That is a huge relief. Now I can float away into the ocean at peace, knowing that one day you will ride a horse in Santa Monica.
I don't know. That song's in my head now, and I hate you.
And I think you drifted into Queen a little bit too. Or are we still doing Highlander? or was it Moulin Rouge?
All these songs.
So this is indeed my last episode. So very, very strange, exciting and sad. So I decided my last episode, instead of, I was just going to do basically just, a really big musical, but I decided to be kind of Diana, and do 1997's Titanic. Now, here's the thing about Titanic. This is not a movie that I love and that shaped my romantic life. However, it is a movie that shaped, I think, the romantic life of so many people. And originally, we actually chose it as the movie to ask most people about at LA Podfest, because we're like, everybody, this was such a huge movie that everyone has a relationship with it. Just even before the podcast, the three of us have talked about our relationship with Titanic at length. So I felt like it just seemed like a monolith to sort of end on. The other reason is we get to try something that we have not done and break the rules a little bit, which I'm always a fan of, which is that we're going to do a movie that usually the big thing is we have all seen this movie. Now, if you have been a long time listener, you know that one day that was actually broken because I showed up to a recording and had watched the wrong film. So, and this is something that has cost me great embarrassment. So I felt like I really needed to put Diana in this position, because I know that she refuses to watch this movie. So we're actually doing this podcast with three of us. We have our esteemed producer that I also really wanted to record with, because he introduced Diana and I and encouraged us to do this. And in fact, when we had gotten a bunch of things in the can early on, he literally sat us down one afternoon and made us actually productionize this podcast. I know there's a better word for it. I just don't know what that word is.
I mean, let's be perfectly honest, Polina. We would productionize the hell out of the episodes. He made us release them.
Yes, there we go. That's much more accurate.
Yeah, well, thank you for including me. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for that kind acknowledgement of the small role I played in getting this thing rolling. And thank you for continuing to refer to me as a producer, which, as Diana pointed out the other day, is as much a running joke at this point as
yes.
As that I'm not very involved.
I was about to say, as much as a running joke about how I hate musicals and the greatest thing to ever happen to my childhood was HBO free preview weekend.
Yes,
both
and have owning things on multiple formats.
Mm-hmm. And fast forwarding through the parts you don't like, which I was very tempted to do for this film.
And our diametrically opposed relationship to sex scenes.
Diametrically, is that like one of the positions?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Often, yeah. It's easy to film, so it's a position that gets used a lot.
But
My wife, ladies and gentlemen.
I would also point out that it was important for me to have someone who watched the movie Proxy. And considering that Ryan is my... we have so many instances where we will think of the same joke in real time we tell each other that we need to see other people. And that's hard to do in a pandemic, but who better to potentially tell the story of how I feel about Titanic than him? Granted, we didn't know each other, but like, I think he might know me well enough to like make an opinion for me.
So, I mean, I think this is a pretty common scenario, and they've even studied this, of people who are in relationships for a long time tend to have this phenomenon of basically that they will start to believe, they will hear a story repeated so often during their marriage that they've actually believed that it didn't happen to their spouse, that it happened to them, or they were there when they weren't. And for this movie, my husband is completely convinced that I went to see this with his mother-in-law and him for the second time. I do not believe this. This doesn't seem like a viable thing that probably happened, and I don't remember it happening. Now, granted, it was 23 years ago. So I think it's to that end, I think it's perfectly appropriate to just have Ryan be your proxy.
Okay, that works too. I kind of believe in that phenomenon. A different version of that is, I swear Ryan has seen The Fate of the Furious with us, and he wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I actually believe he has too. And I know he wasn't. He wasn't. So rolling right along. So this movie, it's basically there are 15,000 people get on a ship. Only a few of them survive. These are their stories. That is all you need to know about this movie. But I bet you need to know more. And Ryan, you said that you actually wrote more about this.
Did you say 15,000? I think it was less than that. It's 2,200, I think.
I thought it was 15,000. Okay. While you tell this, I'm going to look it up. For some reason, I wrote down 15,000, but I probably transcribed.
I think 1,500 deaths is what you're thinking of, probably.
That is, yeah.
Okay.
1,500 people died, you're right. But anyway, 2,000 people, a little over 2,000 people. This another joke ruined by my inability to remember anything. All right, so.
Anyway. So for those intrepid holdouts like Diana, here is what happens. James Cameron's historical epic about the doomed maiden voyage of the R.M.S. Titanic centers on two young passengers who fall in love. Rose DeWitt Bukater, played by Kate Winslet, belongs to an upper crust but desperately broke family. Her mother, played by Frances Fisher, pushes her into a loveless engagement to an abusive and controlling man, played by Billy Zane.
Woo! So what? I wooed Billy Zane, for the record.
Mm-hmm.
I hear
not
too.
The ship, not the abusive marriage part. Just to be clear.
Yeah. While contemplating suicide, Rose is interrupted by Jack Dawson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, an itinerant artist who won a third-class ticket by chance. Charmed by one another, Jack tries to convince Rose to break free from her family and social station. The two form an emotional bond as only young lovers can, and no sooner does Rose announce her intention to run off with Jack once the ship docks in New York than does the ship slam into an iceberg. The rest, literally, is history. Rounding out the cast in the present-day framing story features Gloria Stuart in her Oscar-nominated role as Old Rose, and Bill Paxton as the leader of the salvaging expedition. And then some of the historical characters based on real-life people include Kathy Bates as unsinkable Molly Brown, Bernard Hill as Captain Edward Smith, who's recognized for playing King Theoden in The Lord of the Rings, Victor Garber as the shipwright Thomas Andrews, and Jonathan Hyde as Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line chairman, who will be better known by avid Happily Ever Aftermath listeners as the doomed Egyptologist from the 1999 classic The Mummy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I have never seen this movie, as Polina has alluded to, but I would like to point out that also in this cast are Marg Helgenberger. I believe she plays the granddaughter of Old Rose.
Oh, yeah.
And Danny Nucci, who played the friend of Jack, who was part of that poker game and was able to get on there.
Mm-hmm.
I have...
Fabrizio.
Yeah, sorry. I like them as well.
Oh.
So.
I like Victor Garber, who played Thomas Anderson.
Oh, okay. In Titanic?
Yes.
Well, you know how I am. I always like to, say who they were. See, to me, I usually have like he's known for playing a good quote unquote dickhead, i.e., specifically in The Professor in Legally Blonde, and also Goldie Hawn's ex-husband in The First Wives Club. People, this is how I'm trying to contribute to this episode.
No, this is good. This is excellent. Yeah, he was he was really good in Argo. Anyway, lots of people in this movie.
Apparently 2,300.
Yeah, approximately. Yeah. Yes. So, great. So moving right along, I saw this movie in the theater in 1997, probably, or maybe very early 1998, because it came out in December. Just like everybody else. And why I saw this movie is, one, I really like movies about sinking ships. They scare me because I'm terrified of drowning. But yet, like, that's probably why I go to them. But really, because like Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, and at the time, like, they were still sort of a little bit indie stars, like not quite. Leonardo DiCaprio, I had a huge crush on from What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Mm-hmm. And did you have Tiger Beat magazine covers of him all over your bedroom wall?
It was a little past that, but in my heart, yes.
So wait, it went past the bedroom wall and then into the living room as well?
Yes, that's what it is. Yes.
Okay.
In the hallway. Yeah, I just thought he was, and he was a really good actor. It's like, he's dreamy. He was amazing in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and actually probably pretty good in this.
Okay, so I apologize. I am channeling approximately 15-year-old Diana, who by this point I'm just like, Leonardo DiCaprio, sexiest man ever, because all my people around in my classes are talking about how attractive he is all the time.
Oh, right. See,
I promise I'm older now.
She still says that occasionally, though.
Yeah, but I get that. So he was also in Romeo and Juliet and The Basketball Diaries, which were all movies I loved. So, and then Kate Winslet was also in Sense and Sensibility, which we've done. She's great. And then she was in a movie, in Heavenly Creatures, which is a movie that I love. And honestly, if this podcast was more of a friendship, that probably would have been the first one we did. It was more about friendship. I love that movie. So I thought I was, I realized that it was like, I don't think I was realizing how kind of over the top, sort of melodrama it was going to be. It's a movie about the most famous shipwreck in, history. So I don't know why I didn't think that, but that was me. I saw it in the theater, and then since then, I think I have seen it. I've never owned it because I did not like this movie. And we've often joked about, like, I just want an edit of this movie that's just all the ship procedural shit. I'll be much happier. But I think this movie was on in the background a lot. Like, it was, it was on TV some of the time. Sometimes, you would stay at someone's house. You would end up with it, like, if you're at some, renting a cabin. People love this movie. Like, walking in the middle of, there are people who, there's a lot of people that as we learned, own this movie. And so there is a chance that you can walk into a living room and someone will be watching this movie. So, but this is the only second time I've re-owned this movie. Like, I've rewatched this movie from the beginning to the end. I've been able to steel myself to do that. So, Ryan, does any of that speak to you? And I just want to say, actually, there's one important thing which will come up later. I was 24 when this movie came out. I was living in San Francisco, trying to have a, life, or trying to have like an adult life, trying to figure out what that is going to look like.
Mm-hmm. All right. Where to begin? Yeah, I mean, my view on this movie, I guess there's so much to cover. I'm not sure when we want to touch on what, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it's such like a multifaceted movie, and we could have like an entirely different conversation about like how I responded to it immediately after I saw it versus the sort of like long tail of the cultural impact. And even now, like I'm tempted to kind of go like reverse chronologically because like this movie kind of fascinates me, knowing what I've learned in like the intervening years about like the production history and how like apparently this movie changed an awful lot from what it might have been in post-production, that there were lots of like editing choices and sort of like tonal choices, depending on whom you believe, shaped strongly by that song, and like the kind of like Celine Dion turns in this performance and it becomes this whole like opportunity to make it, you know, less about like, because you think about this movie, it's like, you know, historic epic, visual spectacle, you know, disaster porn, escape thriller, and love story. And it's interesting that like in most people's minds, it's like 80% love story. And
I know.
And watching it, you remember how much of that other stuff is in there, and it's like, oh, it's weird how this balance got struck, and that does kind of take me back to when I first saw it, because I was, I of course like knew that it was purported to be very romantic, and we have like these two young leads on the poster and everything. But I actually, the impetus to see it actually came from my fencing coach. It was one of only 2 films I was ever, quote unquote, assigned to see as part of my athletic training. The other being The Mask of Zorro, which I think just because, you know, general, probably less due to like
movie though.
Less due to I think he just really thought it was an important film, but. Even The Mask of Zorro had less to do with like the technical swordsmanship as like the you know, like the student teacher relationship and the learning process and all of that, and also there were swords, which helped. But then but like secondly, like I was just like Titanic was coming like strongly endorsed, not as like a love story for the ages, but just like this technically amazing movie about a historic disaster, and like all of the historic research that went into it and all of the practical effects, and just like, you know, just watching the ship sink in such gruesome detail is just amazing, which I totally felt at the time. I felt it rewatching it this time. And
it's both gruesome and incredible.
And I walked out of my first viewing of the movie definitely feeling that I had enjoyed it.
And you
I
were
was
a
entertained.
Teenager.
I was 14. I was 14 years old, and I remember feeling very fatigued by it.
It's 3.5 hours, or well,
it's like it's
the
it's
version I watched is 3 hours and 15 minutes.
It's a 3-hour movie, and you know, not only are you like watching all of this harrowing stuff happen in the latter half, but there's like such a long buildup, and you're just sitting in a theater for a long time. And I definitely walked out thinking like, oh wow, I mean, my fencing coach was right. This is like a big important movie that people are going to be talking about for a long time. I'm glad I like took part in this event. And
it feels like an event. It's like
and then it like stuck around in the popular consciousness and the #1 box office for like 3 months, and it was interesting watching it sort of like become synonymous with like sappy melodramatic romance, that it's like, oh, just these like, you know, 2 young actors, and Leo was such a heartthrob, and no, these people are, you know, and there's like the stereotype of like the middle-aged woman who spends like every single weekend in the theater rewatching it, growing obsessed with it. And it was an interesting time to be a teenager, because it became such of like a gendered thing, where it also became like kind of like the girliest movie that ever was, which is like interesting for a movie about a really violent shipwreck. But
right,
you know,
and that like talks about the violent shipwreck in, you know, in a lot of technical detail, like, and because you're right, it's like 3, possibly 4 movies, you know.
And that, and it that's part of what kind of fascinates me about this movie's legacy, this kind of like
Right.
really lopsided memory of thinking like only about like not just the romance aspect of it, but like the really like the melodrama of the romance, and just overlooking all of this other stuff that went into it. And it makes me think about like, oh, it makes me wonder what the vision was like, like during production, and what other movies it might have been in another universe.
Yeah, I totally want to hear about that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I would only be like repeating what I've seen on YouTube, but maybe we can scare up a couple of links to put in the show notes, or, but yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Like I had a really close male friend at the time who was like kind of staunchly against that kind of like, oh yeah, I don't want to watch like these sappy movies and stuff. And amusingly enough, he started dating his first girlfriend, I think, at the time, and we all gave him like no small amount of grief for being talked into going to see Titanic with her. So that was kind of the spirit of the time. If you were a high schooler in those days,
and he was the only one in your group with a girlfriend, so he's just like, hey, screw you.
I mean, he was polite about it, but yeah, that was bad. I mean, I would have traded places with him easily, but yeah.
To clarify,
yeah. So Diana, when did you first see this movie?
Hold on, one second before I answer that question, Polina. You've seen this movie all the way through, Ryan. How many times?
Well, oh yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to make a whole segment out of this.
Oh,
but,
okay. Well, like from beginning to end, watch. I'm not talking about you're walking through.
Like
the
made
a
dedicated effort to like sit down and watch it uninterrupted.
Yes.
Okay, there was the first time in the theater. There was last night, and I think like maybe one time after it was like available on home video, although I'm not even sure I did that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wanted to clarify that. You can get into the what you meant.
Like why?
Yeah, but I did,
because the living room situation is one that we definitely
just to foreshadow a little bit. I was laughing to myself when you were talking about like being able to like visiting a friend's cabin or whatever, and people would just sort of have it on. I'm like, yeah, that was my general domestic situation where like any time I walked in the living room, there was like maybe a 60-70% chance this movie was playing. But
yeah, which I'm absolutely fascinated by, and we have to dig into later.
Yes, yes. Let's do that. But first, let's hear from Diana.
Yes. So as Polina had jokingly talked about, Diana is going to watch Titanic because I am someone who does my homework, and this is Polina's pick on the official realm. And let's be 100% honest, Polina. As much as I love and adore you, you do not fall. Your assignment, you're picking Titanic, does not supersede a blood oath that took place in my teen years. And when I say blood oath, I mean
blood oath.
Yeah.
Okay, you mean?
I don't know now. What was that?
I was repeating it for emphasis.
Oh, I see. Okay. I don't know. I thought that maybe it was some reference.
I wanted to make sure that if somebody was like, the car went by and they didn't hear that, this is not. You weren't just doing this because you feel like it. It's a blood oath.
It was a reference to you, Diana.
Oh, I see. Okay. So when I say blood oath, I mean like I was a teenage girl and we got our period, and so therefore we swore on
at like around the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were really, really angry when we did it. We were menstruating. I don't know. Wow, this took a turn.
The menstruation part was a joke, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Who knows? It could have not been a joke. This happens. It's we could like prick our fingers, or we could just both decide that it's fine.
All right.
Point is, the moody teenage girl part was real, right?
The moody teenage girl part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, I could.
Yeah. So tell us about this blood oath, why not? Obviously, not the mechanics of the blood oath. I think we've covered that. What? All right. Like.
Allow me to pull back into metaphor here. So it isn't so much we had a blood oath so much as we saw red every time we heard about this movie. We could not stand that this was like the topic of conversation, that it was all about Leo and oh my God, and this movie. And, Ryan, you jokingly talked about the stereotype of the women who were going and watching this repeatedly. And if I remember correctly, this is 97. This is approximately when the Star Wars prequels were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So, as mentioned previously, this oath of never seeing Titanic was between me and my best friend Aaron, and we just pretty much went through this thing of just like, fuck this movie. We will never see this movie. It was just like so much of a vengeance of just like, why is this damn song from this movie on the damn radio all the time?
I hate this song so much.
Well, I was reading the lyrics to it right before that, and I'm just like, oh, those are the lyrics. That's actually quite beautiful. Okay, anyways. Yeah, here it is, like decades and decades later.
I feel like I would be Diana in this situation. I feel like if I was a teenager when this movie came out, I would have signed a blood oath. Knowing the kind of teenager I was, I'd probably literally have signed a blood oath. But like, this would have been too much for me. I totally understand. The first time you told me that, it made perfect sense.
It's, it was just the whole thing of just like, because it's cool to be anti what's popular. Yeah. Because when you're a teenager, it's just like, ugh, you're such a conformist watching Titanic and giving them your money. Let's go watch Star Wars.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. It's kind of like I have this thing with Forrest Gump. Like, I don't have a blood oath with anyone. I just, at some point, I didn't see it when it came out. And then no one goes, and I've just decided, really apropos very little, except it just doesn't look like a movie I would enjoy. I refuse to see it. And it's a movie that I would say, like, most of America has seen.
I watched the hell out of that movie when it came out.
In fact,
in the theater.
Yeah. One of our coworkers said, "You've never seen Forrest Gump? But if you're at all into cinema, it's a seminal film." I think you know who I'm speaking of, Ryan. And I was like, and I remember you were standing behind me and you go, no, it's not. Well, you did it silently, but you're like, no, Polina, that's not true.
The fact that he said cinema, I knew there was no reason to really take anything he said seriously.
Yes, well, that's exactly it. I'm like, he's like, if you're, yeah.
Okay, if you're into like, okay, I'm sorry, there's like 4 or 5 other Tom Hanks movies you need to see before you see Forrest Gump.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, so don't feel too bad about that, Polina.
Oh, I don't feel bad at all. I feel very good about my decision.
It's fine. I do like Robin Wright and Sally Field. It is weird that Sally Field played like Tom Hanks's love interest and then years later played his mom, so yeah, that's awkward.
There were time skip considerations. She needed to be like 35 in one scene and 17 in another, so.
I mean, shut up.
Okay.
I mean, sure, try to make sense of it. Mm-hmm. So do you still feel good about your decision? Like, well, I did not want to pressure you to break a blood oath that you made when you were 14, 23 years later.
Polina, you had no chance of me going.
Yeah.
The important factor there being Diana doesn't want to watch the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I have no interest. It's not like I'm curious. It would honestly, like, after a while, there was no pressure to see this. And like the whole, okay, fine. At the time, it was irritating because this was just like the peak of my angry teenager times, because not only was it there like, I'm never going to watch this. It was like, no, I got mad when my mom brought the double pack VHS into the house. I'm like, Mom, this cannot be in our house. Because it's like, we could not support it. It's just like, It's like discovering that, the people who made this movie killed orphans. And it's like, no, we are not supporting under any circumstances. I borrowed this from a friend. They know better. They should not know to give this to you and bring this, evil into our home. It's like I'm the mom from Carrie, and it's just like, impure, gone, be gone. They're all going to laugh at me because they found out that this was in my house. And in all honesty, in all honesty, it's like, I'm kind of ashamed at how thou doth protest too much. It's just like any rom-com where it's just like, love and romance. Who needs that? I'm an independent woman who's like, 15 and like really is really dependent on her family for, food and what have you. And it was a phase. And like, what's great
and
is
frankly, video rentals as well, probably.
It's like looking back, like the decisions I made of putting so much energy and like, I think we've talked about this, Polina.
Yeah.
In the teenage years, everything seemed so dire, and every decision we made under a microscope. Everything we did was so important because these were our choices. And now looking back on that, I'm just like, God, I hope I didn't piss off people too much with my rants.
Oh, I think I did. I think I did. I'm going to go with I probably did. It just I probably bored people more than I, pissed them off. But I think, what you actually, I think you hit upon something really interesting. What you just said is when you're a teenager, you're right. It's because the reason they matter so much is because they're your choices. This is the first time you get to make a choice, and those choices say something about the person or you're trying to figure out how to be. And, and how they are different from whoever it is you're rebelling against, like how they're different from the society, your parents, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, there's no taste in the vacuum. And like, and it's also like the kind of teenager you were, and the time was so important. Like, for us, it was all about finding like the music that no one else was listening to. That was like, the biggest badge of honor is the weird band.
And I think you've hit on something that actually explains why this movie probably resonated so much with a certain segment of the teenage audience, because it is about these like two impetuous, well, they're like 17, 18-year-olds who like, not only it's about like, Rose making this decision to like basically like blow off her family.
They're older than that. I think they must. Well, Jack must be a little.
Jack must be. I remember. I think I saw it in an article or like Wikipedia or something that Rose was supposed to be 17, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Only in the books. It turns out when they did it for the movie, they were older to remove the controversy.
Of course, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there must be something really appealing for someone who's wrapped up in that kind of emotional experience, like you were describing, to see these like very young characters not only making those decisions with gravitas, but having it like literally elevated to life and death decisions, such as like, whether to jump off of a perfectly good lifeboat onto a sinking ship to go back to the person you just fell in love with. And,
so yeah, I looked it up. By the way, Diana. He's 20, she's 17.
Gross.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't know. When I was 17, I dated a 20-year-old, but I think it is kind of gross. Like maybe, yeah.
No, see, we're very close in age, and my parents were 2 months apart, and to me, like, of course, there's also different age ranges for types of things. So unless the ages are identical, I'm just gonna go, gross.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know if this is generational.
God, what do you think of Sean and I? Jesus, he's 9 years
I try
old.
not to, Polina, because it's horrific.
No, but in seriousness, I mean, like the delta is like higher significance when the people are younger. Like when I
yes, exactly.
I remember. In high school, I remember being weirded out when, like, I knew a senior who was dating a junior. I was like, oh, man.
How do you deal with
mixing
that?
classes, as it were.
Oh, God. I never wanted to date anyone in my class. I was always like, I wanted to date older, always, a little bit. But not 9 years older. But Billy Zane, the Billy Zane character, Caledon Howard, he
Billy Zane. That's okay.
Hockley. He was 30.
Gross.
Yeah, that's definitely
really gross. Yeah. So
there were lots of things gross about that relationship.
Oh, so many things.
I assume there was gross.
Yeah, the age is just the tip of the well.
Yeah.
No, unacceptable.
It was like, yeah.
You're not my proxy anymore.
I mean, you knew it was going to last. I mean, it was obviously a sinking. It wasn't going to last. It was obviously a sinking ship. Yeah, and there's actually a...
Polina, you're not allowed to be on the next episode.
damn. So, see, now I can say whatever I want. You can't kick me out anymore.
Yeah, but I can edit the hell out of you.
Oh, damn. Damn, the tables have turned.
Yeah. But what would you have to say about Billy Zane? Specifically Billy Zane, not the character Cal.
Oh, I love Billy Zane.
I know, right?
Yes.
Oh, he's so horrific. He's just, I mean, he's like, everyone in this movie is so ridiculously broadly drawn. Like, it's, anyway. So the thing is, so when I saw this, what?
Oh, I wanted to ask on the subject of perfect characters, where do you come down on Rose's mother? Is she like also like a perpetrator in this situation, or is she like also kind of a victim trapped by circumstance, or a little bit of both?
I think she's a little bit of both. I mean, I think mostly she's a victim trapped by circumstance, but I think she could be polite.
Yeah.
I think she could be polite, and I think her fear is real. So basically they've somehow lost money. They essentially are, a once prominent family, now suddenly left penniless. And so actually Rose's marriage is, sorry, I have such a huge crush on Kate Winslet. So this was awesome for me. So she basically needs Rose's marriage, much like, like the characters in Sense and Sensibility. Actually, their marriages are, like when they say security, they don't just mean like, don't marry the flighty artist because like he may not be able to make money. It's like, here's your only opportunity to make, you don't have a lot of power to move through the world, and the only way we can keep ourselves alive is with a marriage. And this is, you're going to pick it, you're like, basically in the movie he's like the richest guy in the world, in the US.
Yeah, and in this movie, so much is made about like the role of wealth in determining your social standing among these people, and they're like not only on the verge of like going completely bankrupt and becoming, having to like work for a living for the first time in their life, but also like losing their entire social context, never get to like, speak to the same people, have the same friends, so
own the same objects. Yeah. It's like basically she's like, the option is presented like, okay, we have to sell all our things and I have to start working as a seamstress.
Yeah.
Like you like basically being ground into poverty.
Yeah, so to me, Rose's mother is one of the more interestingly textured characters in the movie, because she still comes across like very callous about this and like very like cruelly indifferent to what this is going to do to her daughter. But she's also kind of like this, like much like Rose herself, she's a woman who like lacks a certain amount of agency in this social structure, and like completely helpless by circumstance, and is just like worried about having her entire like everything she's known for her entire life yanked out from under her. So you do feel for her.
The thing is, the important part about it is it's not just a loveless, and we've covered this, the trope of he's either a podiatrist or a dentist or an accountant. There's like, and it's presented, in
the most stereotypical realm of that, because those are, I would marry all of those now.
All of those.
But in the trope itself, it would just be like, oh, well, he really enjoys his like, his something boring sweater and his falling asleep with the paper on his chest, and it's just
he's
so
a rube.
He's
not sophisticated.
I'm just
he can't have conversations about art or whatever it is that the heroine is into. Literature.
I'm assuming like a version of that is like I can't describe it, because everything I'm describing, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with any of it right now. But in the movie world, it's just like,
That's what I mean. It's
Fall asleep
boring.
with your phone in your hand constantly.
Shut up.
Yeah.
I'm not a podiatrist. You're a podiatrist.
But it's like, it's basically the boring person, and you're like, oh, yeah, or she could settle.
You're not. You're not.
The
You're,
safe choice.
The
Yeah, he's
movie
like-
I'm thinking of is, oh my God. It's one of the first movies we did.
while you were sleeping.
No, not while you were
not while you were
before.
sleeping. Only you.
Only you.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah. So, no, this guy is, at first you're just like, okay, she doesn't love him. And then you realize he's actually abusive and controlling.
Yeah. No, they're either totally boring and you'll never have passion in her life, or they are evil incarnate.
Yeah, like he basically makes it clear to her that she is literally an object that he has collected. He orders for her. He has expectations. He's old. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's before all the scumbag stuff that we get to see after the ship starts sinking. But
Exactly. And that's,
yeah.
So that's actually the other kind of interesting part of the movie is the class dynamic about basically who, like the people at the top of the ship have all this space and comfort and those lines are very clearly drawn. There's like, and later on this becomes disastrous. Because basically they've made a decision that there will not be enough lifeboats for every single person on the ship because it doesn't look good. It gives people less space to promenade. And therefore
Diana looks confused.
Huh?
Diana looks confused. Is this are you shaking your head in disapproval or it?
No, it's basically just like, of course the aesthetics are more important than opportunities for those, but it's an unsinkable ship, so why would we need lifeboats?
Well, that's what they talk about.
So you never needed to see this movie. You basically
no. That's the nice thing about this movie too, is like, as you said, it's such a juggernaut that you've probably seen. You probably know everything you need to know about this movie except your unadulterated reaction to it.
Oh, okay. I also know a lot about other movies that I haven't seen before, and they're not as billion-making movies as this movie. Yeah. So, you want to talk about Hollow Man?
What?
You want to talk about Hollow Man?
Okay.
No, I'm just saying I can talk
Okay.
about that movie too. There's invisible chimps in that movie.
Next week on Happily Ever Aftermath, Hollow Man.
That movie's too rapey.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing we've also learned. Your favorite movies are rapey. This one is not rapey. You have to give it. Well, nah.
I would assume the man tried if he's as evil as they make him out to be.
Yeah, I would. I saw someone on the internet pointing out, like, what exactly did Cal mean by my wife in practice, if not by law?
Oh, completely. And then at one point, he said, "I thought you would come like at night, like in the morning,
right?"
Because the whole movie takes place basically over 3 days or something, and maybe more. Listen.
I haven't seen this movie, but I can make an assumption based off of what you just said. My wife in what again? Say it again.
My wife in practice, if not by law.
Oh, geez, I can probably feel that as he's probably already given her family money already. I could feel that already. He probably paid their way onto the ship. It's like, hey, I'm already.
He definitely paid their way onto the ship.
I can see that meeting that way. Hey, I'm already paying for her and her family. I'm carrying this whole thing, so I might as well.
But he definitely, like, he walks into her room as she's, he knocks on the door as she's changing, which is like a pretty intimate act, especially in 1912.
But he knocks.
Yeah. And then at one point after he goes, I was hoping you would come to me last night. So
that being the night when Jack was invited to dinner and thanks for saving Rose's life, and they all have a chat, and then instead of like retiring to her quarters, they run off to go to the merry Irish jig party below decks, and then the next day there's like this where were you after dinner last night, and that's kind of the context in which that was. But you're right, there was definitely subtext there. I also read speculation that maybe like Cal was hoping to sleep with her the first time during the voyage, and that was kind of like why he was
I can see that.
Yeah.
It's funny is that this came up when I was flipping through the internet looking for the bunnies. So one of the prep videos that I watched for this episode was the 30-second story of Titanic as told by bunnies. I will link to that in the show notes. But there are a whole bunch of things that, like, everything that you're explaining is just like, well, I haven't seen this, but I could probably explain away a lot of these things based off of I haven't seen this.
It's also like, it's a pretty blunt force instrument. So when I first saw this movie, the love story
about the iceberg?
Yeah, well, yes. I hated the love story so much. Like, I just found it insufferable. I loved these two people. I really wanted it. And there are a few moments of utter magic. But first off, the script, I find, for me, was like, just terrible. Mm-hmm. It was so, like, ham-handed and hackneyed and, like, over, and they would show something and then they would tell you, like, I got it, I understand, like, I hated that. And then I hated the whole, like, this it irritated me so much. But the mechanics of basically how everything unfolded on the Titanic and how cool it looked was like, just incredible. Like, I loved all of those things of, like, how it was going to go down, how, like, when they say, like, the band played, to last, like, how did that actually go down? Like, what, obviously what the ship looked like in its glory day. And I love the aesthetics of that time period. I love, like, I'll see anything around that time. And
it won Best Costume, right, for the Oscars?
I believe it did.
Okay.
It was, yeah, and the clothes are beautiful. Opulence, but oh my God, I hated it so much. And I did definitely find that, like, that was such a female, like, male, kind of breakdown, is like people got really angry at me for like, I started to feel like I'm there's something wrong with me, that I'm unable to, like, experience romance because I just hated the romance of this so much.
Did you actually have people react to you when you talked about how?
Oh my God, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just didn't bother then. And okay, so I would like to speak to our listeners who have enjoyed this movie, do enjoy this movie.
Well, that was the first time I saw it. I have slightly different reactions now,
to continue to join this movie. It's like, I don't know if I particularly like this expression, but I'm going to use it anyways. We're not out to yuck your yum. It's just the experience that we have. I apologize for angry Diana back in the day. Diana right now wants you to enjoy this and make sure that when you're enjoying this, I can't see it or hear it because I don't want anything to do with it. Thank you.
Also the blood oath.
Yeah. Also, like, and there was something delightful even at 20 of being like, yeah, I'm not one of those girls who wants
100%
to watch this movie, right? Even then, it was like, that was such a big thing.
One of those girls that would sleep with the third class passenger when...
Oh, I was definitely that girl. I just wouldn't have... I was not one of those girls that, like, all I wanted was to watch Titanic with my boyfriend, or, like, I wanted, that relationship, right? Like, I was not one of those girls who watched it over and over again. I watched it to watch the ship sink. Still is, still feel that way. But
I mean, I would echo that there's, like, a definite difference in feeling between the sort of major segments of the movie. And it's actually kind of interesting that the fact that, like, the first, I guess I'm telling Diana here, explaining, the first hour and a half is, like, in fact, I think the actual collision with the iceberg happens almost precisely at the 50% mark of the runtime. So everything up to that is, like...
Because I remember it does, because I was like, hey, before we get into this, like, before we start this, I'm going to pause this movie and I'm going to get my tea or whatever it was and, go take a break and then restart it. And I saw the time and it was exactly half.
Yeah. And then what happens in like that latter hour and a half, I think this actually bears getting into the physical mechanics of the sinking a little bit, because it is interesting that as the hole was opened up on like the forward side of the ship, and it starts like the forward compartments start flooding with water. For that whole first phase, like the ship as a whole isn't really sinking so much as it's rotating, and like the bow of the ship is like dipping lower and lower, and the deck is like gradually becoming slanted, and that lasts for like about an hour of film runtime. And like during that time, that's like no one's actually like drowning or dying in this time. That's
this is so the engine room. Some of the people in the engine room.
That's true. Yeah.
That's actually the horrific part.
Yes. Yeah. There were some preliminary casualties, but as far as the story we were seeing that focuses mainly on like the passengers and the evacuation, like at first they're not even convinced they're in danger, and then there's all this like kind of muddling onto the lifeboats. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly more about like the imminent danger and people like slowly coming to grips with like not everyone is going to get out of this, not everyone is going to survive.
This sounds like the beginning of 2020.
Yeah. Yes, well, that was the thing. It was I have to say, like, I like loved, and there's also there's a physical component to it, right? Like, so actually there's this really dramatic thing where what'll happen is it'll break in half, and then the hull, it'll pull itself down. So basically part of the ship will be standing completely upright.
Yeah, and
before it sinks down, like the final thing. So they describe what's going to happen to you, what's going to happen to them, and there's a really interesting section which is basically old Rose. So the way it starts is somebody is going to the Titanic with some new technology and videotaping it and going to find like the treasure, and it's this necklace is the big treasure. It's supposed to be larger than the Hope Diamond. Mm-hmm. And the treasure is like, it is, and so they find the sketch of Rose, and then Rose sees it on the news and contacts them and is like, that picture was of me. There's a sketch that was made of me. And so then basically, and then the whole thing is told as a flashback. And at one point, this one engineer there basically goes, this is how it happened, and he shows this like computer rendition of it. And the he like does it really excitedly, and of course this is where 15,000 people or 23 people died. And she's like, well, it felt a little different than that, and it was a really cool moment that I didn't remember, but I do think like that those two movies, it is funny that even though actually that part takes so much more, takes exactly half of the movie, it's still remembered as a romantic.
Yeah.
Romance.
And it is interesting the way that like sort of the emotional through lines do go from like that hour and a half pre-iceberg to sort of like the hour following the iceberg when like the ship hasn't really like broken up yet, and then like the second big like dramatic transition happens when like the ship starts cracking apart and the sinking starts in earnest, and from there it's just like nothing but like about 25 minutes of solid action, and like honestly just like the last 30 minutes of the movie is amazing. Like,
oh my god, yeah. So when you were saying, so you were talking about the living room, so I assumed you owned this, or your family owned this movie on something.
One of the first, yeah. So My trip to see this movie in the theater, it was just my family, like my sister and my parents, we went, and we all had roughly the same reaction walking out of it, kind of like, whoa, that was good, that was impressive, I can see why this movie's a big deal. And like over time, I think like my dad actually had this like really, let's say, a strong resonance with the movie, which I could never like. I won't presume to speak for exactly why that happened, but I can sort of like describe the outward signs. And the like repeat viewing happened particularly early because there was a friend of a friend who I believe was on the Academy Awards committee who had access to a VHS screener before anyone else did that you are not supposed to copy and redistribute.
Yes.
And this person copied and redistributed it, and my dad managed to get his hands on a copy with like the little caption at the bottom saying like, for Academy Award consideration only or whatever. And like from the get-go, it was this film was viewed like a lot during that interim period before it came out on home video, which was how much later was it in those days? Like almost a year, I think.
Yeah, usually, right?
A long wait.
Really depends. 6 months to a.
Yeah.
That's true. I don't remember.
And
exactly.
It's strategic, so it could be different for any
That's
movie.
true. Oh, you're right, because it was like Christmas. Some movies were more like would cut. You're right. I remember that. Yeah.
Or hey, the Academy Awards are happening. Maybe you want to remember this movie from February that came out. It's on video now. Woo!
Yeah. And just that like phenomenon of the Titanic repeat viewer, of which there were like you heard about this happening a lot, and it and I got to kind of like have a front row seat for it. And there are a couple of different ways of explaining it. I suppose there's like sort of an escapist aspect because like part of the movie's technical merits is that it really does succeed on kind of like transporting you to this other time and place, the ship of dreams, as it were. And it also fascinates me, like people having discretion over like not necessarily watching the movie front to back, which also that, but also like having the freedom to skip around. Like a lot of people spend a lot of time in like the pre-iceberg part of the movie because that's just they want to kind of like hang out in the happy place of the romance. And one explanation that I saw like a few times was that it was sort of like pushing back against the tragedy of the ending. And it's like, as long as while you're rewatching the movie, Jack's not dead yet and they're not separated yet. And you just get to like jump back into that like brief, beautiful, romantic interlude, but before it has to end. And if you just keep watching, it never has to end. And there was a funny moment when some of us were speculating about like you could branch out to maybe other movies with the same actors like Romeo and Juliet. That one might not have the same problem.
Well, I mean,
maybe not. I don't know. I didn't.
It does. It
a little bit.
It actually does.
I don't know. When Mercutio's out of the movie, there's no point.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, that was my personal kind of like learning to hate the movie. Like I talked a little bit about the kind of like backlash and the zeitgeist, so it was like kind of seen as like the sappy movie, but over time it was just like you hear these lines of dialogue that were like a little bit thin the first time, and then they just kind of become grating after a while. And there were like dumb running jokes in my family about like, it was like, kind of like making fun of some of the more awkward parts of the movie. Like one line in particular that jumped out at me when I was rewatching, if you remember, one of the like interim scenes where like Jack and Rose are first met, but they're not really like falling in love yet, is when like Jack is following her around the deck and kind of like pestering her with questions where like he's kind of trying to make sure she's all right, but also kind of like needling the rich girl. And at one point Rose just turns to him and says, "You are so annoying." And like that was that line kind of became a bit of a meme in my family, and like and the meme itself got past the point of being funny. And I swear to I nearly retched when I like actually saw that scene.
I forgot about that completely.
Yeah,
so
I know.
What kind? So I think what we've sort of established is that there is there's the people who love this movie, the people who that love the romance of this movie, and the people who like the ship, the sinking ship part of this movie. So what parts of it was your dad? Or were other members of your family, and were other members of your family different, sections of it? When it was on, would people sit down and watch one part or another?
I think my dad was the only one who was like really into the movie itself that much. I think my mom enjoyed the movie, but not to the point of not letting it wear down her patience. She was really into the soundtrack. That was the other kind of assault on my senses, was that even though my mom was as annoyed with the repeated viewing as I was, she would still play the CD in the car when we were driving around to do whatever. And because I mean if you said you get sick of hearing it on the radio, it's just I get
Oh my God! If I had to do it on top of hearing it, everywhere you went, I would. Yeah. I don't know what I would do. I really would. Yeah, it would definitely. Maybe it was also, they're make sure you move out as soon as you can, because. Maybe. But which one was your dad? Which if he's the one who repeatedly watched it, which part was your dad? Was he more into the, the epic, grandeur and romance, or more into the procedural?
Can you even answer that question?
Well, I mean, I think anyone who was a big fan of this movie definitely appreciated the procedural side of it. But he was definitely responding to the escapism and romance side of it. And and I feel like most of his viewing was kind of toward the middle part of the movie, sort of after they've fallen in love with each other. And we'll talk precisely when that was, but then kind of and it's the earlier parts of the sinking where it's still a little bit more romantic in the adventurous sense, where they're rushing across the ship to save one another, and not so much the imminent death and destruction. So.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah, it's interesting just to I'm not as much of a rewatcher of things, especially movies, maybe TV shows more, or especially sitcoms. Things that are short, 30 minutes, where you can do it while doing other things maybe. Mm-hmm. So I'm sort of fascinated by this idea of rewatching, a particular movie to the point where it becomes a family joke.
I mean, that's my life story, Polina. Did I not make that clear? And all
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can what I'm characterizing as escapism. Mm-hmm. I can definitely appreciate it. Maybe I would probably, hold myself to a different standard of what counts as a movie worth doing this, and not to be too judgmental about it. But but I can appreciate that at a certain point, a movie might be less about experiencing a story unfolding so much as just going to a place, So and I feel like a lot of people, including my dad, who got really into Titanic, was it wasn't even so much about the beats of the plot or what happens with that character. It's they just wanted to revisit this sort of fantasy existence of
I'd like to kind of give props to the fact that your dad still found enjoyment in watching it as an older person, because it's very easy for our family to make light of the fact that I watched Disney's Robin Hood on repeat for years. I watched Little Giants on repeat for years. I mean, I'm sure you had movies like that where, I don't know if you did it as much as maybe your younger sister did, whom we had, if you want to listen to our Casper episode with Carly.
That was such a good, you totally should. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and it's very easy when you're younger to just be let's watch it again. But the fact that, I can't do that. Like Polina, you said you just don't get it. Now I'm just how could I do that? Because I watched, speaking of Billy Zane, I watched Zoolander on a loop when I was younger, because I just wanted to laugh, nonstop.
I feel like I did it a lot more when I was younger. I think maybe that's it. I just haven't done it well. And I think some of it for me is actually kind of sad. It's because I'm listening to what you're saying about returning, and I'm realizing that, in rewatching, they're obviously, during this podcast, there's so much rewatching and thinking about when I would, under the circumstances you watch something, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's like there's like this anxiety of like, oh my God, but there's so many new movies. There's so many movies I haven't seen. I should not be spending time watching a movie.
Get out of my head, Polina.
Yeah. and that's kind of ridiculous that there is something about putting on, returning to a place. And one thing also I've learned is like, there were movies where I was like, I hate this movie the first time because the mechanics were so annoying to unfold for me, and it kept putting holes in the plot. And then I would read so annoying, much like Jack. But I kept like, then I would there was a time where I would just rewatch all the movies twice. I would make sure I would watch it for the podcast.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I still would do certain movies, but one of the things was then the second time when I could let go, I kind of started enjoying the process a little more. Now that I knew what happened, I could enjoy like, oh, I see the moments in the relationship, not the weird, stupid, way that they're trying to like stretch out their misunderstanding to fill an hour and a half. I could kind of enjoy the process a little bit. So yeah,
so you're saying you didn't do that for this episode, Polina? Watch the movie twice?
I did not watch this movie twice. Okay. I don't. Yeah, I fully admit that I did not put 7 hours toward planning for this movie.
Ryan, you had alluded to there's lots of instances where you watch their relationship. There's apparently an hour and 30. But I will use. I haven't seen this movie. I'm trying my best here, people.
Okay.
Except I'm not watching this movie. Screw you all. Okay.
Let 'em.
Yeah.
So my question then is, are you ready to discuss when did they fall in love?
I am so ready because I attacked this question with a certain amount of gusto. I was like just like staring at the screen with my finger on my chin, like, okay, I'm gonna look for this. It's like because it's interesting because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not like a badly crafted movie, but like the character, I mean, it's not.
Actually, I think the pacing of it is not bad.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Actually, just like
it moves for a 3+ hour movie.
I've
Into the Sea.
I've heard it. Yes, I've heard it observed that this is like kind of a well-written movie in every regard, other than the dialogue. Like
that's actually really. Oh my God! Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it this way. It's actually a very well-structured movie in the end, and it was easy in my memory to sort of like let all of the beats of Jackson Rose's relationship get kind of jumbled together, and in my memory there's this kind of like anachronic thing of like, oh well, like here's why they relate to each other, because like Rose wants to escape and Jack like sees this thing in her that no one else does, and and like watching it actually unfold in sequential order, I was like, okay, this is a little bit more interesting than I remembered it being. Like I still felt like the characters themselves were kind of underwritten, and it was awkward that like Rose is the only one with the real arc, but Jack is the one who's kind of like the audience POV character.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I didn't think of that. Yeah,
and it's interesting that like they clearly had something to offer each other from the very beginning. Like the first time they meet, Jack is like literally saving her life and intervening in this like sort of larger problem of her happiness, and obviously there's like this initial attraction, and I had a number of different scenes kind of competing in my head for like what was like the point where it was less sort of like interest in a person and more like really being attached to each other. And where I have to peg it is if you okay, so this isn't actually a scene that has like one super memorable line to refer to it as several other do, but if you remember a scene where like Jack has already been told not to see Rose, and I think he like finagles it to where he gets a chance to talk to her as she's like walking along the promenade, and he pulls her aside into this room. I don't know, maybe it's like a squash court or something. It's just like this big open room, and I remember it actually being like particularly brightly lit. Kind of stood out that way. So that scene where basically like Jack is trying to convince Rose to break away from her family, not even so that they can be together, but just because like he's seeing that it's, you know, ruinous for her happiness. And I think he says something about like, you know, this fire in you is going to go out, maybe not right away, but eventually if you're just like in this sort of dead situation. And
wait a minute, your mom used to say that to me all the time. I thought it was a meme in your family.
I am not Cal.
Your light will go out. Not now.
I went to Cal.
Because you're strong, but eventually.
Yeah, and I mean, and that was like one of the through lines that it's fun. This was like the you jump I jump line was repeated like 3 times I think in the movie. Oddly enough, does not seem to have kind of gone into the meme lexicon of this movie,
which actually shocks me because that really stood out to me because it introduces an entirely different paradigm for what a relationship can be, which I'll talk about.
Yeah, and that actually did kind of resonate with me when I was watching it only this last time. Like I said, I didn't really remember that part all that clearly, and I was like, oh, you know, that actually is nice. That actually is romantic. That kind of makes me feel for these characters a little bit. Diana, let me explain. This goes back to the
You jump, I jump?
Yes. That I mean,
I as someone who only got absorbed through memes, I know that one.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, but because it reminds me of when The Notebook, if you're a bird, I'm a bird. But okay.
I don't know what that means. But
I don't know what that means.
At first, it starts off on a very literal level where like
is it when she's contemplating suicide?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And his tactic for talking her out of it basically says like, if you jump in the ocean, I'm going to have no choice but to jump in after you and try to rescue you. And I really would rather.
And it's really cold.
And also as a way to say like, and also I'm not looking forward to how painfully cold the water is going to be, which, you know, is not.
Oh my God, he's trying to guilt her into not killing herself.
And it worked.
Oh God, what a pushover.
But then they come back to that a few times because it's like I think another thing he says is like, you know, again, this is the first time they met. She's trying to say like, look, this is none of your business. Just leave me to this. And he says like, I can't. I'm already involved.
Yeah.
And that kind of like they just sort of build on that where like Jack feels like, okay, we've been brought together by chance, but you know, now that I've, you know, even just this like minimal amount of getting to know you, I feel like I bear some responsibility for the situation you're in. If you're metaphorically drowning, I have to rescue you, even if I am a bystander. And that's kind of the, you know, that little like kernel of caring that the relationship blossoms around. And that's why for my choice, I'm picking like that one scene where I believe that was the first callback to you jump, I jump. And that's like, you know, you, I guess he's saying you jump away from your family. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to, you know, you won't be alone. And, and then I didn't really remember how the pacing broke down, but that was actually like the last scene together before the Jack I'm flying on the bow of the ship, which is also their first kiss, which is a pretty clear signal of like, yes, this has moved to the romantic. And then actually, you know, the scenes that come after that moved at much more of a breakneck pace than I remembered, because it goes like, and as Old Rose narrating points out, that sunset that they're looking at from the bow of the ship was like the last sunset before the sinking. So like everything happens just during that night that goes on. And like I said,
because you said Old Rose says, and that was the last daylight.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And oddly enough, I seem to remember having the remaining scenes having a little bit more breathing room between each other. But
completely. I had the same thing. I remember them really different, like that part really different.
Yeah, and it went like directly from Jack I'm Flying to Draw Me Like One of Your French Girls, and then from there,
that's where they get that's where she gets naked, Diana, and
and then there's like a brief encounter with the family or the manservant or whatever that gives them an excuse to go like running into the holds, and then they have sex in a car. So,
so it goes basically so they meet because of the potential suicide, which is done kind of in a fit of pique. I mean, it's not, or maybe she did. It's clear that she feels stifled, right? Like she does not want this marriage. and
it's not clear
when she gets on the boat, because she says
Yeah.
like, everyone thinks it's amazing, but to me it's a prison or something like that. And then he's invited to dinner as thank you. They have dinner. He arranges to meet her by the clock, which comes up later. And then that's where they go, and they end up like going basically to a party in the hold. And yeah, it's like a bit of a Kaylee, and it's so.
And by the way, just while we're on this topic, was it kind of in poor taste to like during the Jack I'm Flying to like tell Rose to climb up on the railing? Like, isn't that kind of like didn't we just go through? Is it like some kind of like symbolism where it's like being juxtaposed with the suicidal thing? Is it like this one's on the bow and the other's on the stern?
Too. I just think like they didn't think it through.
Yeah, that never occurred to me before this last.
Because remember, he does it, and he felt so free. And
That's
so
true.
I just assumed that he was like, so he did it in the opening scene. It's like, because he's this person who's like, anything's possible, right?
Yeah. This is the King of the World scene.
And the famous King of the World
scene. At the time.
Yeah. And so then he's like, let me show you this. Let me share this experience with you is what I got. Like,
yeah.
Like you need to have a sense, you need to feel like a sense of freedom. Like this is something you've never really felt. So when do you think he fell in love with her?
I was kind of thinking it was about the same time. Yeah, that's a fuzzy question. I would say like he was well infatuated with her before that, but if we want to say like like kind of firmly like emotionally engrossed, I'm not sure there's enough nuance in that movie for me to have like a different answer between
that's fair.
Like when they felt that way for each other and stuff.
So I think that a lot of it for her started when she actually saw his art. Like I think she thought he was cute. And then, so I think there are two things that cement it for her. So I think one is she saw his art. And one of the things that she says is basically, you really see people.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is your gift. Because he basically shows her the sketchbook. He goes to Paris to try to make his fortune. He wins this ticket to go back home in a poker match. Or some sort of card game. I don't know if it was poker. Okay. And basically, so he's an artist and he sketches like all these people, and she's like, "Oh, you really see people." And then when he's at dinner, and I think she probably shoves those feelings down, but when she's at dinner, when they're at dinner, he basically, they try to grill him, and they say, hey, they're incredibly rude to him. And they basically are like, well, her mother is like, do you like this kind of, do you like living this itinerant lifestyle? I mean, she doesn't say it exactly, but she doesn't use those words, not a quote. And he's like, yeah, I love it. I love not knowing, what's going to happen day to day. I love not knowing, I think it's more honest, and I love, and he sort of sells it. And I remember, at 24, I have to say, like, I kind of, as much as I was like, ugh, I was also like, it's not that simple. But I think this time I was actually really like moved. I was kind of not moved by it, but I was like, oh, okay. I get it. Like, I see where at this moment, suddenly Rose actually can imagine another life, right? Like he paints a picture of a life that's not all fear, right? It's actually something to move toward. And then they go to the hold and go to this party.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they're able to be together. They're able to, like, they sort of survived a dinner with her side of the family, or sort of her, not her side of the family, but her people. Her people. And which is like, really boring. And then they go here and she's able to keep up. And I mean, to be honest, I just found the whole thing was like, there were so many places where I was like, oh God, like at one point she drinks, like she's drinking a pint of beer and he's like, what, do you don't think a lady can, or something like that. Like a
I think
lady
rich
can
girls
drink
can't
beer.
drink.
Yeah, rich girl. That was a thing. I was like, why did you put it like that? Like, it's not that rich,
Also, technically, she's not rich, but
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Like, there's just like, I'm like, nobody would talk that way.
I think 1997 girls might. And so
Yeah, that's the thing. It's true. It's like it's 1912, but anyway. So they
smash cut to the 40-year-old women in the audience. You go, girl.
Totally. And
or my mom. Go on.
I think my mother also didn't like this movie, as I recall, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, and so like I think that first, I also think that this is the first man who's put his arms around her. I don't know, when he was trying to save her, and I think there's that's like, point number one. Point number two, she sees his art, and she already has proven that she's like got an incredible eye. She basically has come home with all these like Monets and Picassos, or so they say, which is, another ridiculous thing. And so she clearly has an eye for this stuff. And so it makes sense that she would fall in love, because she's like, if he can see other people, he can see me. Like he's, and at this point, nobody sees her, right? She's an object. She's there to be pretty, to keep society moving in the same way it's been moving the whole, life. And at one point he says, and he's like, yeah, we'll go horseback riding, and like, she's like, you mean I'll straddle a horse and not go side saddle? He just presents this like freedom that's a bit like, for him, I actually think that I think it's similar. I think there's a chemical thing that happens when they touch when he saves her. Mm-hmm. There is and basically she has to trust him, to like kind of turn around and get out off the ledge quite. And I do think that it's kind of this. I actually think it's the same thing when he sees her. When he sees her that night, just free and easy. I think it goes from just being a crush to like, I can't, let this go. I think the first chink for him is that he saves her life, or he like talks her off the ledge, and so there's an investment, So, and then, he's just, by the time they have that night together, he's gone.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the two parties, and like a lot has been made about like the class juxtaposition, about like, oh, the poor Irish people are the ones who really know how to party, and the upper class party is all boring. But I think just like the way that the two characters move in that, and this is like, partly something I found interesting and partly just kind of another writing gripe, but the fact that like both characters show like sort of an innate talent for moving in the other one's circle. Because like you already talked a bit about Rose being able to like drink with the best of them, and she does like the dancing thing where like she stands on her toes and like, oh, I can like dance harder than
right. But that's a different. But that is
because
true. What she's basically doing is like, I mean, I thought that scene was so dumb, but like, what she's doing is she's like, I have learned these skills, which is obviously like really, that's a pretty advanced ballet move.
Yeah, well, but she was also showing off something that was sort of like shoes. But it was also like sort of physically painful. And should I explain, Diana?
No, I know this.
Okay, never mind.
I'm aware.
Okay, but well, never mind the dancing. But the symmetry there is kind of with like, and you touched on this, and I couldn't decide whether I was like sort of like amazed that they kind of managed to pull this off, or just like disgusted at the way it was written. But the fact that like Jack manages to like go in among like these incredibly stuffy, incredibly rich people, and sit down, and with such like flawless eloquence make like being homeless sound like the most glamorous thing ever. And they're like literally toasting him like to homelessness. No, it's like no, actually it's to making it count, I think was the so it's like And on the one hand, I was like, this is a really interesting scene. On the other hand, I'm still kind of annoyed that this feels like a little bit unearned. Like, what is like what? Yeah, because like just Jack being such like a ridiculously persuasive character, which kind of was like set up in the way he like talked Rose off the ledge, and even like a little bit before that, as he's sort of like bantering at the poker game, he's like super witty and expressive, and maybe that's just the sort of like fantasy element of like, oh, he's this incredibly charming, charismatic teenage boy, and
don't forget attractive.
Yes,
and floppy hair. So, Diana, when do you think they fell in love?
Well, if the 30-second video that I watched is to be my basis of my answer, also things I have absorbed in pop culture, I kind of agree with you, Polina, that he was probably gone the second he decided I'm involved, and that was part of it, And I won't get into it because there isn't much to get into, but if I remember what I have absorbed from pop culture, they all get locked downstairs. Like, he gets locked into Cal's area, and a whole bunch of people in the third class are locked downstairs because they're trying to make it so people aren't overwhelming.
There's a lot of locking in this movie.
Yeah.
Actually, so there's...
You mean murder, Polina? The word is murder.
Yes,
Well, let me try to give you the abbreviated version, because like the whole like kind of hour segment, like after hitting the iceberg, but before the ship breaks up, the circumstances kind of conspire to send Jack and Rose to wherever like the most interesting stuff on the ship is happening. And there's a lot of like little twists and turns where like, Jack is framed for stealing the diamond, and the Master of Arms takes him down, and Rose goes back to like break him out. And then they go back up to try to get on a lifeboat, but Jack can't because they're only doing women and children. And then, and so, yeah, there's a lot of moving around and kind of like below decks or like,
so the
and
important
then people get locked. So he actually gets locked below deck in several separate times. Like, because the hold of the ship at one point they're it was probably just to do crowd control, but then they realize they're also sending lifeboats half full because they don't want to inconvenience the rich passengers by being...
That's the reason why? I thought there wouldn't be enough for everyone, period.
Well, there wouldn't be enough for everyone, period, but they could have saved more.
So it was both then.
And so their whole thing is like, we'll come back, but what they did is they then locked people into the hold. Yeah. And there's all this like, they almost die like 50,000 times. Yeah.
Well, Ryan hit the point that I was going for, basically, that Rose was going to get on, but then she got off and went back for him.
She was actually on a lifeboat that had lowered halfway down, and she like jumped over the edge onto one of the exposed decks. And,
sure. Yeah. The point is that she had the ability to go, but then she didn't. And that's my moment for her.
That when she realized like, life is not worth living. I'm willing to take this chance.
When it was more along the lines of, I have a decision to make, and my decision is to do this. And she went through with it because she had an opportunity to make a decision to jump off the first time she could have jumped off a boat, and then the other time she did jump off a boat. So when she did make that choice, but she was making the choice for her to do something rather than to jump off a boat to not do something.
Oh, that's a really good point.
I didn't know she jumped off a boat. I just know she was on her way to be rescued and then wasn't.
Yeah, she basically, the whole like, lifeboat thing gets really crazy. And unlike another really interesting part of this movie of rewatching it is, and I did think I remember this last time, is basically how the crew, what happens to all the crew members. And the guy who designs the boat, like everyone else, is going to go down with the ship. But they
failed, so they might as well.
Right. But the guy who finances it and does a lot of the design decisions, including not putting enough, and he actually pushes, and I don't know how accurate this is, but
is that Victor Garber?
Yes.
Actually, no. Well, I'm not sure. Are you talking about Ismay or?
Yeah, the not the captain, but I forget exactly. Yeah.
So
yes, Bruce Ismay.
Yeah, Bruce Ismay is kind of like the money behind it. He works for the White Star Line. He's the chairman, and he commissions the ship. And
and he's the one who made the decisions to have.
Yes, and yeah, and it's kind of sad. So that's not so the one played by Victor Garber is the shipwright, the actual architect of the ship, Thomas Andrews, and that's kind of tragic because like he was saying he kind of like makes friends with Rose and like chats with her a few times throughout the movie, and he was explaining that like he wanted to make the ship safer and have more lifeboats, and he was sort of overruled by financial concerns,
financial and also class concerns.
Yeah,
right.
And
that's what I was kind of getting at.
Right, and what's particularly tragic is that Andrews, the shipwright who wanted to make things safer, kind of like goes down with the ship very stoically. They last see him like standing in a stateroom or something, just kind of like waiting. And then Bruce Ismay, and this is actually a historical thing, actually did escape in a lifeboat, and there's this whole historical controversy over whether he did that in a cowardly fashion or a rational fashion. And can't even get into that right now, but
in the movie, it's clearly.
Kind of, it's depicted as shameful, right?
Yeah, it's really shameful.
Yeah, and he has much more. There's a whole historical rabbit hole around like who is really responsible for these decisions. But as far as the movie universe is concerned, he was like making all of these bad, overambitious decisions, and then like did get onto a lifeboat and kind of escaped with his survivor's guilt.
Yeah,
and like there's this great scene where he's being lowered past one of the kind of like one I don't even know what the role, but like basically one of the guys who reports directly to the captain, who's trying to organize this, and like he pushes, and you see the guy, staring at him like, wait, what are you doing? And like it's such a look of shame. And the other thing is he is the one who pushes. He said, "Oh, make sure that you speed up."
Right.
Let's speed up so that we can get more headlines. Like we'll get in early and we'll make more headlines. And that leads to them not being able to, go around the iceberg in time, in theory. And also that there's this moment where he basically makes a decision, like right when they hit the iceberg, that what they're going to do is they close everything down. So everyone in the engine room basically just drowns. Everyone below who's working just drowns. And they have it's horrific watching that part. And so all these people have died. Everyone knows it. And they kind of look at each other. But
that's when they fell in love.
Yeah, exactly. And then when the fantasy, well, kind of actually in a weird way. I mean, that's after, I guess. But yeah, but all the people above deck, in this, they basically, get to run around, and they basically still are, they're not realizing what's happening at this moment when all the workers have basically been, almost all of them have been sealed in and are going to, they're going to drown. So when did she fall? So that's when he fell in love with her. When did she fall in love with him? The same time?
No, that was okay. So
okay.
That was both already. So he fell in love with her when he saw her and got involved, and she fell in love with him when she made the decision to jump off the light.
To jump off. Okay, you're right. Okay, sorry. All right.
Yeah. So basically, all of that description of horrific deaths. Of all the people who were left on the boat, Polina. What better way to ask, so what happens next?
I mean, this is the thing. We know, right? That's the whole premise of the movie, is that basically Jack and Rose, try to save themselves as much as they can. They find a raft, which is like a door, a decorative door. And Jack tries to get on top of it.
Polina, you don't even have to describe it. There's been so much on the internet about this, about whether or not he could have lived or not. So
So basically, they try to keep each other, going and alive, and they know.
What are they doing on that door?
And so basically, a lot of people are basically dying of cold,
hypothermia
at this point. And And then you basically see old Rose, like, in some of the last scenes, it's all of the things that she's done in her life. Like, he basically, there's this whole speech about, like, you're going to survive. You're going to do all these great things. And she does.
Yeah, she went on to get married to someone else, Mr. Calvert, I believe they said, and she had a bunch of children and grandchildren. And
well, she was you see all these pictures.
Yeah.
She was an actress. She flew a plane. You
Right.
see her at some point. You see her with in Santa Monica,
on horseback.
Horseback, not side saddle. Outrageous. And so that she does stuff, or that he dies, and that she tries to make it count. She basically tries to live for both of them.
Oh, and just for detail's sake, when she's picked up from the rescue ship, she gives a false name. She claims her name is Rose Dawson, actually, and basically is never heard from by her family again. So she kind of slips off and makes a completely new life for herself at that point.
The last two scenes of the movie go as follows, and they irritate the F out of me. So one is, the whole thing is that this film crew is trying to get this diamond, which is more valuable than the Hope diamond. It's the necklace that you see in the sketch of her, right? It's like a heart-shaped blue diamond surrounded by diamonds.
Is it a such thing as a blue diamond?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's also historically significant. I think it was made during the French Revolution, they say. And
I think Napoleon wore it or something.
Louis XVI.
Louis XVI. Yeah. Somebody wore it. And it has all this historical significance, and it's and a lot of the plot hinges around it. But essentially, she it turns out basically at some point, Kaladin, the Billy Zane character, gives her his coat to try to look like he's being nice, and in the pocket is this diamond because he grabbed it, so.
And he literally just forgot it was in the pocket. That was actually a very funny moment when he realizes. So
he's like, the jewel was in the pocket, in the coat, and the coat is on the girl, and it's ridiculous.
In the green room.
Yeah, totally. It felt like it's like, okay. Anyway, hijinks ensue, and so basically, this filmmaker thought that when they found the safe, that this diamond would be in there. And I just want to say that right now, the Hope diamond is worth anywhere from 250 million to 350 million.
Okay.
So if this was more valuable and it was on the Titanic, it would I don't know how to appraise jewelry, but let's say that it's probably worth maybe $500 million. So in the last scene, she doesn't tell anyone this because no one knows where this is, but she's held onto this thing. You see her going, and it's either a research ship or just a
salvage expedition.
So she basically kind of tries to recreate the I'm king of the world scene, and she takes out of her pocket the diamond, and the diamond necklace, the multiple diamonds, because the chain is also just encrusted with diamonds. It's a substantial thing. It's 20 carats or something, I think they said. Anyway, it's big. It's bigger than a golf ball. And throws it into the ocean, telling no one. Then the next scene is her sleeping, and she's dreaming. She's 101 years old. She is dreaming of going back to the Titanic. So it starts out with, you see the basically the, watery remains. And then slowly it turns where she's going into the dining room. And she walks through, and you see it in all of its splendor. And all of the guests, including the workers, are lined up around in this rotunda.
The grand stairway, I think.
The grand stairway, and there's this beautiful. There's the clock, which is where she meets him for the first time that they go off and go to the party, the Kaylee thing. And she walks, she sees him, and he turns, and they kiss. They see and they turn, and she essentially, they all start clapping as they make out essentially in the middle of this grand stairwell. And with this is why I really wish you would just watch this one scene, because I totally reacted like Diana. I'm like, okay, so your fantasy is not that you get to be with Jack, but every single person on the ship is alive. But what they do when they're alive, they're not doing the things that they were doing or living their best life or whatever. They're clapping for your making out with this guy in front of them. It's an intimate thing. I'm like, it just irritates. I was like, the kindest reading I could have is that basically it's like her life with him is free, is accepted by everybody, right? So maybe that's it, that everyone's free. But I remember the first time I saw it, I think I was like, oh, this is great that she has this, and everyone's there and everyone's alive. But it irritated me so much that that was the end, and it was just all about them, instead of here are people that, frankly could have been saved by, different design choices. Lots of different choices, and their entire role is to be background for your epic love, and you're 101 years old. You have more wisdom than that. The other thing that irritates me is about the scene before then, where she drops this, is the actual her throwing away this. First off, she has been carting around this ridiculously large and heavy thing for, what is it? 80 years.
80 odd years, yeah.
80 odd years. She's moved around all over. She talks about this. First off, kind of a bummer for the guy who said he spent 3 years looking for this thing. Second off, which, okay, he's one person, but throw the guy a bone, man. Just throw him a bone. Give him the thing. If you really care, this, think of the school, think of I don't know, the ship's safety commission. You could start with $500 million.
I honestly don't think that she would be able to keep that. There would probably be some sort of investigation as to why she owned this thing. Or there would just be some, she would not get all of the money out of this Polina.
Well, whatever. Somebody. It could be used to look at. She could have sold it ages ago. Yes, it's difficult to,
you can always go to a museum.
But also, yes, it belongs in a museum. But also,
Louis the 16th. Come on.
It's also a little bit blood money.
Right, but then why hold on to it for all those years? If you wanted to, the time to have thrown that thing into the ocean, the blood money. If she was I sold it, and now I'm going to take this $300 million and I'm going to throw it in the ocean. But basically, the time to do that is now. The time to have done that is when she landed when she got saved.
Well,
and just been like, okay, I'm free. Or the night before she marries her husband, like, you know what? This part of my life I'm letting go of. Or, I don't know, at literally any other time in her life, like, why what, like, the whole idea is she's supposed to be free suddenly from this. She could have freed herself at any time for like 84 years that she had been carrying this thing around. Like,
wow, this really
why
upsets
now?
you.
Yeah,
It's so annoying. It's just,
and I'll point
it
out,
feels meaningless. Here's the thing. It does not feel consistent or meaningful. It feels like a cheap shot. It makes no sense, like emotional sense to me, because this is an independent person that could have gotten rid of this ages ago. Or at the very least, since she's going to, give, like, donate it to research. It just feels like an empty comment. Yeah. Why are you so scared?
I'm not scared. I'm amused and trying to figure out, should I interrupt Ryan or should I try to chime in?
Chime in. I'm done.
All right.
Are you sure?
Are you ready to be even more upset?
Fuck.
Okay, I have trivia. Do you know how that scene was originally scripted?
No.
And I think this might have been one of those other changes in post, because I can totally see them shooting it this way and just being able to change it in editing. It was originally scripted where Bill Paxton's character walks out and finds her standing on that deck or at the railing or wherever, holding the diamond, and he actually sees her with it. And like they exchange some kind of dialogue about, like, oh, you had it this whole time, that's amazing. And then she drops it into the ocean in front of him, which just,
oh my god, that would, I would
cruel.
have to, like, I would not be able to rewatch that. That's just even crueler.
I know, and I think the stage directions, even, or screen directions, whatever you're supposed to call them, say something to the effect of, like, he cycles through a few different reactions and then settles on, like, acceptance, like he gets it, or like after this whole, like, emotional journey of hearing her story, which is like
no, I would be like, hey, crew, it's down there, go get it.
It's good that they changed that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, at least he had the opportunity to go get it.
Well, hopefully, I mean, ocean currents. I don't know if that would really.
Well, where are they exactly? Are they in the water?
They're like,
they brought her on the ship. They couldn't tell the story.
I think. Well, yeah, I think no.
I don't care that much. You don't have to answer this.
I believe they are roughly over the wreck of the Titanic. So at least symbolically, I think she's like dropping it back down to return it to the shipwreck. Although realistically, it could go like any number of miles away from there.
That's the thing. I mean, they're not. I thought they were moving away. I guess that's how I interpret it. They were like moving away from, the thing. Maybe so. Yeah. That would irritate me more. So maybe it's better. But
all right. All right. Yeah. So whatever. Okay. Again, I am not attached to this, so it's so easy for me to play this game right now, because we can't exactly play the what happens next game. But let me point this out to you, Polina. I would say that her whole thing of just like, why didn't she do it when she first got there? Because there would be questions, there would be chaos, but she wants to leave and not be found, I assume, by her family.
Right. Yeah, but then she could just throw it into the ocean at that point.
Why would you is it about throwing it into the ocean? I think what you're doing as a scared person who also still has the rationality of like, let's try to, get away while simultaneously like not drawing attention to yourself, that thing would create a trail no matter what, because then they would know that she's alive. So I think what happened is that her intention was to get away, and I'm going to give you like a very simple answer, and I'll try to defend it as I go through. In the beginning, there's a rational, like, I have to get rid of this, but I can't make sure anyone finds it, because if they find it and it's there, you can't just say it was, it could lead to her, it could lead to Tony questions. So she decides to keep it and make sure that there's no way of it being traced back to her. And you talk about going on and living her life, and she did. And guess there was a way to where she forgot about it. Not because, oh my God, it was $500 million, but because she was living her life and she got freaking old.
And maybe it only became sentimental to her when she was brought back to that time.
And she only thought about it until they asked. And it's like, shit. Holy shit.
Okay, no.
No?
I'm sorry. You do not forget about I mean, this thing is fucking huge. The logistics of of moving and storing and like
that thing was uninsured for how many decades?
I mean, she's moving it's
wasn't it in a coat and Billy Zane forgot shit it was in the coat.
Yeah, there is precedent.
There is precedent.
Yes, okay, but he forgot, because in the heat of some pretty extreme stuff, she would have had to
You mean in the heat of escaping a Titanic?
Find a box.
Also the cuckoldry.
Find a box, keep it, try to keep anyone from finding it, move it the thousands of times that she apparently moved. It's just
it's fine. The only thing is that you're just in the heat of something, you forget about that kind of thing. Yeah, in the heat of escaping with your life and losing the love of your weekend.
Right. I mean, I get that she didn't do it right away, but I'm it just doesn't make sense to me that she would want to free herself after all these years. That is the part that doesn't make sense to me. Even her waiting until it was 20 years, she's well, maybe this will come in handy, or maybe I'll
Oh, weird. Oh, I'm sorry, Polina. I think I can answer that question. We're going to have to agree to disagree because I am a hoarder and I understand what it's like to forget the things that you owned, even if it's worth money.
Yeah. So
Right. No, I am too. I really struggle with this, but still, this one is too, it's too much. It's too much to move around. It's dangerous to own, something that valuable.
I think we are perilously close to putting more thought into this than the filmmakers perhaps did.
Well, and that's what makes me so angry.
I know. Yeah. It's relatively simplistic symbolism that makes plenty of emotional sense as it's resonating in the moment, but does not hold up under a lot of scrutiny. And it's just sort of
moment to me.
I know it's a visual signal that sort of connects present with past, and we can see why they chopped that scene down to its minimum.
Yeah,
and I'll just and if we want to sort of decode the emotional content of that scene, I'll just give a quick nod to the little nonverbal noise that Rose makes as she lets go of it, or the way she tosses it. It's so weird. I think I think
it's in the bunny video.
It's in the bunny thing where she doesn't really drop it, but she just sort of tosses it, but with this very tiny hand motion, and she makes this little squeak as though she's almost surprised that she had done it. And if you want to just watch that and decode what she was thinking, it comes across as though it was very much a spur of the moment kind of decision where this Diamond needs to go be with the ship, or it needs to go be with Jack, and she just decided to do it. Maybe that's the privilege of being 101 years old.
Why would the Diamond need to be with Jack? That's the other thing. She could start a foundation with that money for artists like Jack.
Okay, I'm not sure that
this is because Polina, a woman's heart is a deep ocean of secrets.
Oh, okay. That's that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, there we go.
That line always works on me, and I wish it didn't. Okay, so what about Ryan, what do you think?
I always wanted to see a sequel of this movie called Lusitania. I have little to add to that. I'll just
you have no imagination. It should be Hindenburg.
I have very little to that I agree with many of the practical concerns around the Diamond, and I actually got into my own little internet rabbit hole about the legal ownership of the thing, an interesting wrench that got through because you can
Sean and I were trying to figure this out
Diana, I promise I'm not going to get back into this too far, but it's just the fact that Cal gave it to Rose as a gift, so does that mean she could claim it as her property, but clearly there was no paper trail, and was it an engagement gift? Is it automatically rescinded if she breaks off the engagement? And the really interesting kind of wrench in the works is that way back at the beginning of the movie, the expedition crew mentions that Cal's father made an insurance claim on the Diamond.
Yes, no,
one
the
of the only
insurance
pieces of evidence that
is
exists So possibly if the diamond were recovered, the insurance company would become the owner of it.
The insurance company would become the owner.
Not if it were picked up from the bottom of the ocean. Like Bill Paxton's character was never in danger of losing it to the insurance company because at that point it's covered by maritime salvage law. But if it comes to light that the thing would never went into the ocean in the first place, then that could there's a spinoff. I just want to see like the legal battle over that diamond.
Oh my God, yes, the legal battle over. Oh, that would be an awesome movie. I would really enjoy that.
Okay, you realize the premise of our podcast, it's not what happened to the MacGuffin at the end of this movie.
Well, that's all we have to work with. Everyone else is...
May I chime in then?
Yes. Okay.
Was there... Okay, because you guys are talking about the end and like splicing the hell out of it. So again, my mostly open brain, my pop culture infused, but not emotionally involved. Well, in the movie itself.
You have the freedom of not being made insane by this movie.
No, I was, but that was early and often.
That's true. Well, no one has the freedom of not being made insane by this movie.
Actually, if you listen to our clip show and listen to Murray Valeriano, he's like, what's your relationship with Titanic? Nothing. I'm like, wow, you really broke the premise of our episode. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. You're the person we have really wanted to have on, and we chose literally the worst question. Because I mean, I loved that question because actually the depth and breadth of the answers that we have got on that was really wonderful.
Okay, so allow me. My thought on this was everyone has an opinion, like what you just said about how she throws the thing in. The last scene is that she passes away, and then
I want to talk about that too.
Okay,
but continue.
I see. So the whole idea where she kind of comes back, and then she's I would assume in heaven, and going through with this whole thing about being reunited with him, and everyone is celebrating it. Oh yeah, they're in heaven, they get to do that, and they're celebrating their love together. I honestly think it's that the celebration is them being reunited, not necessarily that they're being accepted, but they're being reunited. But what I think is kind of funny, because of the point of it bringing that, here was this situation of like they're making out and everyone's excited about it, and like, well, what the hell is up with the fact that she has this family, she's had this life. I think the answer to that is in a meta sense of this crew asking about what was happening and her telling this story. I think her story, much like the beginning of her life, was hijacked by people deciding what it is exactly the story that wants to be told. So we, the viewers, are getting Titanic, this amazing love story that happens to happen between her and Jack because their love is amazing. And he's able to show her this thing. And she's like, yeah. But you guys wanted to know about these things. She's like, so this love story, it's amazing. And it's like, you're watching it play out in this movie that, everyone has been watched and knows to be the movie Titanic. But the end of this movie, of course, is she is reunited with Jack because it is their love, and it's amazing. She's like, yeah, okay, everyone, but what's actually not being shown in the movie is that, yes, she dies, she goes to heaven, she's reunited with him, she does meet up with him, and everyone is very happy because he is the one who told her to live her life, and she meets up with him. Thank you, Jack. Thank you so much for the life you gave me. And much like the 3 days that they had that was blown out into this whole thing, that ending was blown out, and it's not her story. So she thanks him, and then she goes off to go be with her husband. She leaves that whole thing where people are applauding. She's like, no, thank you so much. And then she goes off and she finds her husband in the afterlife.
Oh.
Her story is not the story that she wants to tell. It just happens to be the one that people are, there's a diamond, and this is beautiful, and Jack, and the paintings, and all this other stuff. Yeah, that happened 80 years ago, everyone, but this is the story I want to tell. Okay, fine. I met this guy, and this is what happened. Okay, but this is so amazing. Yeah, I'm sure she's in heaven with Jack right now. I'm with my husband.
Yeah, and they hang out, the three of them hang out.
Maybe
they're friends. I mean,
Jack was a blip, who did an amazing thing for her in an opportunity that happened to have happened, but her life was her life and her own. She gets to be surrounded by who she wants. Are you saying that they're all chilling in heaven together?
Yeah, why not?
I don't. Okay,
I'm sure she had other relationships.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing. They're all hanging out.
Yeah, Diana, I like that interpretation. That's probably one of like the better interpretations of the heaven thing, and I like that you brought it to kind of like a meta level, because that's like my kind of complaint about this scene in general. I get so annoyed with like people in general jumping to the conclusion that like this scene means that like Rose has died in bed and what we're seeing is like an afterlife. So the first time I saw it, I had interpreted it as like, oh, this is just this, beautiful dream where she's, reconnected with her memories and got to tell the story for the first time after she hasn't talked about it for 80 years. And as I like walk out of the theater and kind of go into the world and I'm hearing other people talk about the movie, it's like, oh yeah, and how she like dies at the end and how she like meets Jack in heaven. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Why would, that doesn't, why would you jump to that conclusion? And I guess that I sort of like bring that under the umbrella, under the sort of like excessive sentimentality and people kind of like projecting their own like, wishes onto the movie. And I think I might, maybe not as much time as you spent obsessing over that diamond going to the ocean, but that's my little bone to pick with how they chose to wrap up that movie.
And I felt like, but I mean, I don't know, did it stick out with you to you that like there's no like she's actually quite internal? Like she's more she's not really like a show off or a like she likes people, she's really, but I don't, she's not like a I have to be a center of attention person. Like I think true. And so it just had no emotional consistency that her dream of like when she would be in heaven, she would be clapped.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the other thing that supports kind of the afterlife reading is like if it's not really like celebrating Rose as the center of attention, but kind of like welcoming back. It's like all these other people who died, and she was the one who kind of like survived and escaped and had a life beyond the shipwreck. So,
well, what about maybe that's the person she became in that 80 years that we never saw?
That she became the center. Or she wasn't. Yeah, became someone who was craving the center of attention.
Not craving, but someone who is not afraid of it anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's just like this thing of like all these people gathered for nothing, no reason other than to clap at you.
I mean, it's definitely
your epic love. It's like it's so cringy.
Any way you read it, it's a weird filmmaking choice because like the scene sticks out like a sore thumb just because like it's not a very like metaphorical movie at all. Like there aren't other dream sequences, there aren't other imagination sequences, and just like we need like something to like finish strong on. So it's like, how about a dream sequence or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what.
I think maybe that's it too. Like, it doesn't feel at all consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And I get like wanting to bring I found it quite. There were so many chills that I felt when it was like bringing, the visual of the plate of it coming back to life from its watery grave into its, once into its splendor.
There were some epic match cuts throughout the movie between the wreckage and
Yeah. And, it's funny, like you were talking about middle-aged women and this to sort of wrap up about this movie, you're talking about like middle-aged women watching it, over and over again. And I have to say like, my feelings about this movie were such a roller coaster because one, I think watching like the two big differences was one, watching the the wrecking, and I found it so painful. Like obviously I knew the first time when I was 24 going into it what it felt like, or that what was going to happen, right? But this time it was, I mean, I think it was so well done. It felt excruciating. It was not because it was a bad movie, but because it actually was really effective and terrifying. And you knew it felt so real. And you're thinking, maybe it's this thing of being older that kind of comes up, which is that, you're more sensitive to that kind of thing. I think like you're just more, I felt more sensitive to it. Like it was harder. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is so neat. Oh, wait. Okay. Oh, now the hull of the ship is going to crack open and they're going to like, it felt very much like, just human beings sort of trapped in this maw, and maybe that's why the last scene really without any control. And that's why the last scene maybe irritated me so much more, because I was like, these are all people with their own lives. That is the tragedy. There are 1,000 roses. There were, 1,500 roses and Jacks, and then but then I would vacillate between like hating the love scenes, but then also getting kind of sucked into that, the way that they portrayed, the way the two actors especially played, falling in love, for the first time, like when he first, that scene that I hated that drawing scene, but I have to say, I had these moments where I would be just totally kind of melting and then like, gross. And then, or just like annoying and then melting. So I don't know.
Yeah, that was a like long, slow burn of a scene. There's like a lot of space to feel stuff in.
Yeah, exactly. And I had all the peels, all of them, everyone.
All right. Well, Polina, when do you actually hit middle age? Watch it again, and then let us know what happens.
Oh, I'm so firmly there.
Okay, not by my math. Thanks.
No, quite by my math. I'm going by family. My family, women in my family tend to live into their early 90s, which means I'm like more than halfway there.
Okay, well, compliment not accepted apparently by Polina, so.
But thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So.
Wow.
Speaking of endings.
Yeah.
This episode will go on.
Oh, it went on.
And on.
And on. Wait, no, that's a different song. Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay, Polina. We did it.
We did it. We did Titanic. Mm-hmm. And this is my last episode as a co-star. I hope, and I don't know, maybe you'll like invite me back to, guest star if you get desperate. But
ouch, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I mean,
I meant like, something falls through, not like you will get desperate, but more, as a last ditch effort.
Yeah. We'll have to see. I promise that the listeners will get updates on the next phase of HEAMCast. Yeah. But for the time being, it's going to be kind of awkward to say this, but like Polina loves to know what you all think about the movies we talk about, and for a little while she'll have access to it. So why don't we do this as if this isn't the end of an era and say, let us know what you think about Titanic. And you can tell us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at HEAMCast.
HEAMCAST.
You can also find us on Facebook at Happily Ever Aftermath. The longer form thoughts can be at our email, contact@heamcast.com. If you want to leave us a review, you can find all the ways of doing that on Apple Podcasts or even Facebook or any of your podcatchers that accept reviews. We'd appreciate that. It helps grow the show. Ryan, is there anything you'd like to promote?
I'm on Twitter. If you say nice things about the episode at HEAMCast, I will see them and probably retweet them.
Yeah, he does like to feel good about himself.
I crave validation.
I love it.
Yeah. So, Polina.
Right. Yeah.
What is there left to say?
Well, I just want to really thank, this has been so much fun to do with you. And just, there's this, I feel like that's the biggest, thing about doing this, was just our, interplay. And that's what I'm going to really miss. Also, really the guests, and the audience, just your ideas and your energy and suggestions. And it's just been, and I learned a lot about my relationship to movies, which is good because that's the point of the podcast, but more just how also everybody, kind of carries around these stories and has to kind of reformulate them over time, has to as you get older, you're kind of rewriting a lot of the stories that were really basic to you. And watching and listening to guests kind of, do that, is like watch them go through that process was really interesting. And I got introduced to genres of movies that I, just ignore most of the time. One of the other, I think, fun side things about this is I always felt like really cringy about my, when I think about my teenage self, like I think a lot of people feel really cringy about it. And and so I just I always and I think thinking of your former self as, embarrassing or an idiot, it kind of wears on you. And I think it helped. I really felt like I'm much kinder to my teenage self now. I have a lot more sympathy for her and what she was, and how she was trying to make sense of the world. And which is, kind of makes life a little lighter, that you don't carry, you're not just carrying around that embarrassment about yourself, about, your teenage years, but sort of a certain kindness and grace toward that person. So that is what I want to say. And thank you, Diana. I never, it's all you've, it's all so much about you. So, this podcast, this process.
The process, the podcast, the talkings and the sharings. It's all there. It's all there in the archives whenever you want to revisit.
It's true. Yep, yeah. We have 3 years. Mm-hmm. Over 3 years.
Yeah. So here's to you, Polina.
To you as well. Cheers.